Hey y'all, it's your Captain for All Things Creative coming at you with the Vinland Saga Season 1 and 2 anime conversation. So if you're new to this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you're returning, you know we talk about a lot of things. And right now we're in our anime bag because Vinland Saga was a great show. Now I have the link in the description box to the interview that I'm referencing because the creators have their thoughts and like a whole two-part interview about the themes and like the goals that they had when making Vinland Saga. So check it out, but I'm definitely going to talk about it here. And really one thing that helps kind of frame the thinking of the creator is actually that poem that you see in the beginning frames of the season 1 intro. It's like a quote from a French poet named Paul Valéry, which says, like rowing a boat, we enter the future backwards. All we see are scenes of the past, and no one cannot see the views of tomorrow. So since none of us know the future, unless if you're psychic or have like superpowers or something, right? The past is the main lens that we have, and even as we try to make plans for the future and navigate the future, the information we have is all behind us, So when the creators were, interviewed about Vinland Saga, Makoto Yukimura, I believe, the manga creator, was talking about how they themselves are anti-violence, right? So they really wanted to express their sense of morality and, the idea of having a place in the world where people can find solace and justice, But they picked a time where violence was kind of the norm, and they said they chose the Vikings because it felt like a time period, I'm quoting their interview, a time period that was the most accepting of death and violence as part of the core culture. They say the Vikings of this age had a society where it was common sense not to view those who enacted violence as even the slightest bit evil. So the evolution of Thorfinn, as somebody who's very steeped in this culture, to someone who very firmly rejects violence, and wants to create a society where people can have shelter and comfort, from all the injustice of the world. It's a very cool story, and he does have to go through a lot and face a lot of the harsh truths of the world in order to get to that point, right? And besides Thorfinn, obviously, because, he's the GOAT, I have a lot of characters that I really love. I think for season 1, my favorite character is, I'm gonna have to go with Thorkel, since he's the embodiment, of a true Viking warrior. He ain't got no permanent enemies, no permanent allies. Whoever's the strongest, wherever he can throw hands, that's where he wants to be. And we actually get a lot of the backstory of Thorfinn's family, and how, Thorkel's actually his uncle because, the dad married his sister. And it's interesting because even though Thorkel himself is very steeped in the Viking culture, seeing his brother-in-law, leave the life of violence and like plant in his head the idea of like what's a true warrior, what's truly worth fighting for, has him shook for the rest of his life. Even though he doesn't want to change his ways, he still wants to see, what that other side of life, that Thorfinn's father and also Thorfinn himself is later gonna get to see. And I also, as an honorable mention, love none other than the drunk monk, Wilbard, I believe that's how you say his name, because he was actually spitting a lot of, like Judeo-Christian philosophy, and a lot of, what he talks about actually you see echoed in the series, kind of just like the idea that everybody is a servant or a slave to something. You know, obviously they're servants of God, like the drunk monk, but he is kind of enslaved by his addiction to alcohol in a way too, you know. And then you have the prince who's kind of caught up in Christianity at first, doesn't think he has much choice. But then once he, you know, has his moment where he has this dark night of the soul after, you know, his Ragnar dies and he gets mad at God and has a beef with God and decides he's gonna try to do better than God with making, you know, the world in his own image and in his thoughts of what's right. It's all a cool arc, you know. I would say for season 2, Pater is my absolute favorite, since he was someone who was a formerly enslaved person himself, but he steps in a big way, you know, to try to find a way to get justice for, you know, Thorfinn and the homie when them people you know, dig up their fields, and he does it in a way that's just so smart, because a lot of times the farmhands who, you know, are very much happy to be able to oppress someone else, you know, whenever something happens where, you know, they're chastised or something happens where they're frustrated, they take it out, you know, on the enslaved people. And it's cool the way Pater decides to mete out the justice in a way that makes it so that there's not any blowback on, you know, the slaves, but he, you know, finds the evidence of the button of the people that dug up their farm, whatever, and, you know, makes it so that it's in their own self-interest to back away from them, and you know, I just like how he navigated that whole situation, and I think it's cool that he doesn't become like the other farmhands who, you know, became the oppressors once they stopped being oppressed. He takes that kind of enlightened path. And the bigger debate, you know, about what's better, season 1 or season 2, definitely raged on online. And I think season 1 lays the foundation for the major themes to be explored. But season 2 is where you really get into, you know, the big life lessons and the philosophy. So, like, if you're looking for fighting and all that, you're going to like season 1 better. But if you're looking for, like, the meaning and, like, why was this story created, season 2 has all the meat. So I like both seasons. And I disagree with people that say, you know, season 2 was not as good as season 1, because I liked the message, you know, more than, you know, the little violent fights, whatever. But of course, it was exciting seeing Thorfinn, you know, come of age, and you wonder, what is this kid going to become the whole time, because his dad is so great, but the world is so awful. And it's amazing that, you know, he has this trajectory where obviously he is a product of his environment, very much so at the beginning of his life, but through his experiences and through the seeds that his father planted, he's able to, you know, grow and evolve and be this very great man who wants to, you know, establish Vinland, or the place, you know, where people can find solace in this world. And it's just an amazing trajectory. All right, so let's get to interview with the creator and what I think are the 3 biggest messages, at least for me. Now, the end of the interview that you see here, like right above the pictures, you see this part where they say, we portrayed tilling land and growing wheat as humanity being productive. All we can say now is, how will this change as millions time goes on? I think it can be seen as a starting line for all of us moving forward, right? So this idea, especially, you know, for people that don't like season 2, that, you know, it's boring, but really the use of Thorfinn as an enslaved person as a worker tilling the land, it's the only place where he's actually free to explore who he is, you know. Like it kind of has like this liberation theology kind of upside down kind of mindset, because he has nothing to lose at this point, whereas everybody else in the story and every other point of his life, people have so much to lose that they're slaves, you know, to whatever it is they're trying to protect or trying to gain, you know. So the way slavery is portrayed, you know, is something that is really cool in the story, and kind of shows how, you know, there is a freedom in having nothing to lose, you know, when Thorfinn lost his dad, and, you know, even the ability to roam around with the Vikings, you know, as was the status quo at the time, you know. That's when he's free to explore. That's when he learns everything, you know. He keeps saying, you know, I didn't know anything about life. I didn't know how, you know, plow work. I know about horses, you know. So he's free to become himself when he has nothing. So it shows, again, kind of like the blessed are the poor kind of vibe that we see in the Bible and liberation theology, but then also just how much everyone in the world is a slave to something, especially when, you know, they have things to lose. And I think the wealthier the people are in the show, you know, or the more they have to protect, the more desperate they get. Like even the landowner that, you know, is Thorfinn's master, you see he's just accumulating wealth. He's a slave to accumulating wealth and more slaves, and he's so terrified of it being taken away that he tries, you know, to suck up to the king by giving him all these big tributes, you know. And even in season 1, Astolad's patron, I guess, I don't remember exactly his name, might be his family member, was also a slave, and he was buying slaves, and Astolad was looking at him like, this guy don't even know that he's not free, because he has to keep, you know, pursuing after money to keep up this lifestyle. So, you know, he's bossed around the slave, but he himself is a slave to his money. So again, it's very cool how they kind of show the paradox of living, and how the Bible even says no man can have two masters. You know, what you value, what you put time in, you are a slave to that. So make sure, you know, you putting your focus and your heart on things that are eternal, not like, you know, money and temporary things that could really have you in a bad spiral for nothing, you know, because it all could get taken away at any second. The next big message is related to that quote about tilling and farming, because that idea of planting seeds, you know, and tilling the land is also a spiritual message. And I think it's one of the coolest messages for like parents and teachers, you know, because a lot of the times during the show you think that Thorfinn ain't learned nothing from his dad, you know, but like finally when he's older, he goes through life, he goes back to those seeds that his dad planted, you know, about, you know, what a true warrior is and how he shouldn't have any enemies. And I really love, you know, that idea that, like, especially as a parent myself, you know, if you plant the seeds, yes, your kids may look hard-headed, or people may look like it's not taking root in their heart, but like the Bible says, you train up a child the right way, eventually they're gonna, you know, hold on to the good stuff, and it'll take root, the positive things, you know, that you try to sow. And that also ties into the biggest message, that no one is your enemy, you know. If you go back a little further in this same interview, they talk about a reader from the Ukraine asking, you know, what would a warrior do in these war times, you know. And this is why I think Vinland Saga is so timely, because even now there are conflicts all over the world, you know, especially talking about the Middle East, and then even on college campuses, protesters fighting against protesters. It's like conflict happens all the time, war happens all the time. But what the artist says, that even in the midst of war, I think a true warrior would try their hardest to think of a way to make up and move forward. And that idea that no one is your enemy is so powerful. And you even see it in the Bible in Ephesians 6:12, They literally have a verse that says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against, principalities. I just pulled up right here. Principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness in this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places, right? So even if you're not a Christian, that idea that, if you think that, that girl that said something to you is your enemy, or that guy that took your lunch is your enemy, in the grand scheme of things, right? Why did that person take your lunch? Could be because of poverty, it's like there's a whole backstory into it, right? Even the girl that called you a name, why is she doing that? In the grand scheme of life, everybody is suffering because the world is messed up, and a lot of times we project and take things out on each other. And then I guess the secular pop culture version of this message is like handling the Matrix, when they're all obsessed with bending the spoon, but then the mic drop moment and they're like, actually there is no spoon, right? So like the big goal is having control over your own mind, over your own heart, over your own anger, and realizing that even if that person took your lunch or whatever, at the end of the day, you gotta sleep at night, and whatever their reasons are have nothing to do with you in a way, So the goal of the true battle of a true warrior, right, is changing yourself and realizing that when you're wronged or when wrong happens, there's no such thing as revenge, since acts of violence and aggression usually only escalate things, right? So let's say, you had a person that took your lunch, right? Let's say, you beat them up back, you fight them back, but then that's somebody's brother, who was protecting them from getting beat. So now somebody else is going to get beat up because this person is now the punk of the school. It's just like, just trying to make a lighter example, but really, there's just cycles of violence that you don't want to get caught up in. So people should always, according to the anime, and I think the Bible, and a lot of a lot of more peaceful pieces of literature and art. A de-escalation is the way to go. We should always try to break cycles of violence and to stick to the productive side of life, right? Because let's say, we have all these wars and all these fights. What, does the winner want to be the king of the ashes? No, the winner wants spoils. The winner wants beauty. The winner wants to enjoy life. We all want to enjoy life. So we need to preserve and protect things that are life-giving and have a restorative approach to our problems and to our world, rather than, a retributive one that just destroys everything down, right? And burns the whole world down, and an eye for eye gonna make the whole world blind, right? So we gotta try to, err on the side of breaking cycles rather than repeating them. And again, that goes back to that poem too. Like, if you're looking at the past, we can't move forward. You're literally not going to move forward at all if you just look at the past and repeat it. If you look at the cycles and don't break it, right? If you're going to move forward, why not try a different path? Why not, move away from the things that destroyed our ancestors and each other, So violence should always only be the last resort, and to defend the defenseless most nobly. But because the world is falling, we got to try to rise above when we can. And animes and manga like Vinland Saga help give people the inspiration to do so. So I highly recommend it. Say what you thought about Vinland Saga in the comments. And remember, you are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul. Bye.